Hi, welcome back to another episode of Wilkin and Gutton Plans, the Balance Sheet Breakdown. Today on the Balance Sheet Breakdown, we're going to be talking about IT security. I'm Chris Frederick, a partner with the firm, and joining me is our head of IT, Tom Hasard. So, Tom, thanks for joining me this month.
Thanks for having me.
And so Tom, right, this isn't a new topic, right? The idea of IT security. I think the initial reaction is this is a problem for guys like you, right?
For
my
technology
IT folks,
people,
right? How do you feel about that?
Well, it's funny because we have that conversation a lot with our clients, and especially when something security related comes up. Typically, most business owners will grab the forward button, send it to us, and say, "Hey, what is it that I need to do?"
I've done my part.
I saw security in it. I think there was something about computers. This is obviously a you thing. And security is really just an exercise in risk management, like any other risk that you have to manage as a business owner. So there's a lot of opportunities to understand at a high level, at a strategic level, what's going on in your business and how what's happening in your business impacts your information technology and then your security based on that.
In fact, if you just gave that responsibility to the IT folks, said, "Hey, build me a plan,"
you're not going to get a very good plan because they don't know what you are.
The operation side of it, right? It really is a collaborative. I guess when I think about it, it's the people with the boots on the ground, so to speak, right? The people with their hands really running the day to day who are subject and have the potential to be victims of the next great IT
catastrophe,
whatever that may take.
Yeah.
Where hey, having constant communications and building that plan.
Yeah, and having that clarity both between business leadership, understanding what their risk is and where they need to be focused, helping their technology people understand that. Tech people are generally pretty good at trying to read between the lines and understand what's happening, but there are assumptions whenever that happens. And in security, assuming that something happens in a particular way can mean that we don't think something's a risk that actually is a huge risk. A great example of this is like transaction security. So a lot of businesses have large wire transactions flying around between their business partners,
customers, that they're working with,
customers, whatever it is. And that area is a huge area of risk. And technology people weren't saying, "Hey, you need to look out for your transaction controls," because transaction controls isn't something that we think about. We think about firewalls and computer security and endpoints and software and things that we can touch and we understand. But transaction security is actually a huge issue in business, and now more IT folks are aware of that. And so we're talking about how can you authenticate these transactions? Don't use email to coordinate a wire. If you're doing a large fund over this amount of money, get verbal commitments from everybody. Pick up the phone, have a video call, really verify that this is what it's supposed to be. Because that's a huge area of risk, and that's something that no technology person on the planet would be like, "Hey, what are you doing for your wiring controls?" That's just not something that we think about.
That's a business control, right? That's not a piece of technology. That's not a strengthening a firewall that helps prevent. If somebody calls you or sends you an email, and a innocent enough looking email, and you share the code your bank sent you, you can't.
There's nothing you can
do about it, right? It's gone. It's gone. And so, what are maybe some of the things that we run across when we start talking about implementing, information security plans?
Well, so the biggest thing, and probably the hardest one for people in my field to understand, is that people don't really understand what to even start with.
Yeah.
Because you start with an inventory of what do you have?
Yep.
What do you do? Do you have credit card numbers? Do you have something that's illegally identifiable as person identifiable information? Do you have stuff that if it was compromised would impact your business? Maybe it's not protected by privacy laws, but it's your secret recipe and you don't want your herbs and spices getting leaked on the internet. Like it could be any number of things. And you need to really identify as the business owner, hey, here's the stuff that I'm really concerned about. Here's the elements that I'm not sure about. They might be risk, they might not be. And here's the areas of what's going on. And then your technology people are going to take that, listen to that and say, okay, here's the things that I don't understand about your business. What about this? What about that? Have you thought about this other thing? And then there needs to be this collaborative conversation about procedure and process, because a lot of times there will be risk associated with doing a process in a particular way that doesn't need to happen that way. A great example is like credit card handling. So a lot of organizations don't really think about how toxic cardholder information, as it's called in the PCI compliance world, is. And having anything associated with cardholder data is very bad, and we don't want it. We don't want it on our networks. We don't want it on our computers. If we do take credit cards, it needs to be in a very regimented, structured, policy-controlled way. But, I have a client that they prefer that I just have their information. I can just run their credit card whenever I need to. They don't want to give it to me. Well, that's fine, except that you have all this residual risk then. Or you could have a 10-second conversation with your client and say, hey, listen, I'm sorry. Our policy says we can't hold your credit card information. I just need to get it from you anytime we need to run it.
Right.
Yeah, maybe they'll be like, oh, that's weird. And then they'll move on with their day. And now you're not taking on this mammoth amount of risk that you don't need to.
Right. It's hey, that's inconvenient. The once a month I have to call and read you back the 12 numbers in my security code.
Exactly.
Well, hey, the alternative is it sits on my desktop as in a sticky note.
Right.
That,
it's not a risk because it's on an actual sticky note on my desk under my keyboard.
Right.
And it's like, well,
information
security is information security, not computer security.
Not electronic
That's
information
security.
That's still a problem. Right. Who's coming in and out, and
exactly.
And for sure, right? And I'm a victim of it, right? It's convenient, right? It's really convenient for me to have all my passwords on the first page of my page a day calendar.
Yep.
Yeah,
I've even received. I got a mailer from, I think it was an insurance company, and they sent me like a magnet to put on my fridge that had like a place to write in your passwords on a magnet on my fridge. I was just like, you're an insurance company. You should know better.
Right. You're selling me professional liability. And, my premiums are going up if this is the magnet you send to everybody.
This is not good. Like somebody just walking past takes a picture of that. Now they have all of your passwords, which you probably reuse on a bunch of different websites because you don't have good information security.
Right. And that's just it, right? It's not just about, the company can have the best information security policies that, like us, there's 150 of us. That it's not just about the parameters and the kind of guardrails that Tom, you and your department put in place for us,
right?
And similar folks in your position. You've got to deal with all 150 people's personal preferences
and work styles and processes and
how I've done it
stuff
for the last 15 years. And so that's maybe as big as an equally as big risk as anything else. Just making sure that there's compliance and everybody maybe understands their role, because it's not just IT and hey, the CEO putting together a nice plan.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it can't happen in isolation, and it can't be, we sat down in 2015 and put a great plan together for security, and it complies with all of these compliance obligations, so we're good. We did this. Now we just need to check the box every year, because what you used in 2015 isn't being used now and isn't going to be used 3 years from now.
Everybody in the remote work post-COVID has really kind of upended it, because there was a time where everybody came into the office and the computers kind of sat here every day, and you knew the Wi-Fi network they were on because it's the one you designed, and 9 out of 10 you're hardwired in, and now folks are working remotely, not only from home from their secure, I'll say secure Wi-Fi, right? My Wi-Fi has a password on it. That's that numbers, letters, and symbols, right? But people go to Starbucks and click join the public network and sit there all day.
I hope not on our laptops, but yes.
Not our coworkers, Tom. Not our coworkers. The coworkers of some other entities, might go join that public Wi-Fi. They take their computer with them on vacation, which is maybe the more common one, where whether you hardwire into your hotel's internet access or you connect to their Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Right. It's
there's always going to be those issues of, I need to do something. There's a security policy or a control in place that makes it so that it's harder to do this, but I'm on vacation, or I don't want to deal with it, or whatever the situation is. And so someone's going to say, maybe I can bend this rule, or maybe I can do whatever. And that's where you're talking about, we have our 150 people that are all equally helping our security along. Those people need to be educated. So, again, we're over here in the risk area. We're setting the risk with the business leadership. We have that conversation. We figure out what we want to do. We make a plan. We write a policy. We figure this all out. The next step is we then need to tell everybody else what we just did, what the impact is on their world, and get feedback from them about, is this working? Is this security control viable? Are you losing efficiency because we built a control that looks great to us on paper, sounds great at leadership level, but on a daily basis makes you 10% less efficient? That's a huge issue. Security is here to make your operations secure while maintaining your operations. If we're putting walls in the middle of the road, that's not helping anybody.
And even if you put those walls in the middle of the road, but people decide to, hey, I'm not going to listen to Tom's advice and firm policy and about credit card information or passwords, whatever it may be. I'm going to do my own thing. you can build the prettiest walls.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter.
All for nothing.
And the other element of that is both on, if I have a malicious actor, God forbid, in your environment, how am I going to know? How are you as the business owner going to know? Not your technology people, not some, guy on the help desk somewhere seeing a ticket saying, oh, that looks weird, and then moving on to his next thing. But you as the business owner, how are you going to know? Who are the stakeholders in that situation? Do you trust them with that responsibility? And if you don't, how can you get more visibility into what they're doing so you can build that trust?
Right, because that's the problem, right? We got the best laid plans. Somebody clicks a link on a phishing email or whatever it may be, and all of a sudden there's some sort of breach or there's some data that's been compromised. Right?
It's just an incident. We don't use the B word.
Okay,
we're not going there.
Okay, right. There's an IT incident.
There's an incident. There's a security incident.
Yep.
And every organization out there needs an incident response plan. So we have the plan of how we're going to protect our information. We have all of our risks together. We know, okay, this is what we're worried about. These are our key data areas. These are our key areas of risk. These are all of our controls. We've done all the things. We've educated our users. Now we have an incident. What do we do? Who do we call?
Yeah.
What's our regulatory obligations for reporting this? Do we have to, call up the state and say, hey, something happened? Is this something we need law enforcement involved with? Who makes that decision? How are we communicating with our stakeholders? How are we communicating with our clients? How are we communicating with our staff? All of those questions take time and energy to answer. And when you're in a panic because you had an incident and you think this might be maybe moving towards a breach, that's not when to figure that out.
Right.
You need to know way earlier in that process.
Right. These are my plans in place. So, it's not like the Mandalay Bay in Vegas a few months ago where their IT was down for a week.
I'm sure they had an incident response plan. Yeah. I'm sure it didn't cover the incident as it happened.
Right.
And that's a great opportunity for them to learn and for everybody else in the hospitality industry to say, hey,
what happened?
Interesting.
There? Yeah.
How can I learn from that and do better if something ever happens to me?
Yeah.
Because the whole, in the InfoSec world, it's all about, it's not if, but when.
Yeah.
An incident's going to happen. Things are going to happen. Obviously, we hope that it's not ransomware and our entire industry is getting shut down.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure that we've sort of intentionally created that plan. It's a living plan. It's something that we're revisiting, and it's something that everybody from lowest level staff to business leadership to your technology folks, either internally or externally, are working together on that plan and are all kind of in sync.
Right.
There's always going to be the people that are like, oh, I hate this. I have to change my password.
Right.
Blah, blah,
That's
blah.
so inconvenient for me. Right.
I get that. I hear you. It's not fun, but it's just the way of the world.
Right.
And by the way, here's some additional investments we could make to make that process a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And then it becomes okay, how much money do we want to invest in security? Where are we in?
Right, for the level of protection we want.
And convenience.
Yeah.
Because, you can have a great information security control could be that you have another individual on your team managing a particular data problem so that only that person needs that data instead of all these other people needing to centralize and really build controls around that one person. Or that might be a terrible idea.
Right.
But you have to be willing to think outside that, well, this is how we've always done it box.
Right.
Because technology has changed, which means we can do it new ways. But every time we do something new or make something easy, it's a security risk.
Yeah.
Like Dropbox or any of those file sharing services that are out there.
Super convenient.
Super convenient. Real easy.
Yeah.
But guess what? If you can just click on a link and get something, then so can anyone else who has that link. So
link,
how protected is that link? Okay, it's in your mailbox. Well, do you have two-factor authentication? How hard is it to log into your email? Is the password on your email unique? Have you done all those things? Are you educated on that?
Right.
And then when you get an email, are you managing, phishing indicators and all those other things?
Yeah.
Are you doing security awareness training? Are your users getting phish tested?
Yep.
What are those click rates like?
It's a big set of building blocks, right? And any evildoer just needs to find, the one small
crack in the wall.
Like there's a picture that I recently saw on social media. It was talking about tech companies' softwares are built, and it was like, oh hey, there's this one tiny brick built 7 years ago that if anything happens to this one tiny brick, the entire platform built
collapses,
right? And so I think of that. Hey, that's certainly the way for some tech clients, proprietary software that they're developing and selling on the open market. But that's the same for an internal IT security plan.
That's actually a really good segue to risk management in general, because I would argue that during your secure development process, you should be identifying, hey, this is a security issue, not because we're going to breach client data, but because there's an availability risk.
Yeah.
So in the security space, there's sort of 3 areas of risk that we're really focused on. Confidentiality is the one that gets all of the press because keeping things behind whatever locks they have on them is really important. And everybody thinks of security as confidentiality, but they're not. There's 2 other aspects to security that are also extremely important. Integrity, which is huge in the accounting space. Obviously, we can't be preparing a financial statement and have data inside our systems being manipulated to make it look like something is that isn't, or something like that. Or if you have, an educational institution, something as simple as your grade database needs to be set in such a way that it is not impeachable.
Right, subject to manipulation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the last one, and this one is really unintuitive for people, is availability. No one really thinks of availability when they think of security, but it's so critically important. Our entire livelihood revolves around our digital ecosystem. Now we have our phones, we have our work, we have everything all tied together. I need all my systems, I need all my data. If your system isn't available, how much does that cost?
Yeah.
How much money should you be spending on your business continuity disaster recovery because you understand that if you're down, you have all this additional cost. Your point on the hotels. I'm sure they have a much different approach to that business continuity question now that they've been through that process of having to get parallel systems for their entire stack from top to bottom. And maybe it doesn't make sense to tie all these systems together because it could allow an attacker to move around inside.
Right. It goes the other way, right? Where if you don't have such a robust technology environment, you're importing and selling widgets. Hey, there's maybe other ways or better ways to spend your investments, right?
Absolutely.
So it really is. It's not like a one-to-one. Oh, hey, everybody needs this super complicated and robust.
Everything needs to be Fort Knox, and we need 14 layers of security between you and any piece of data, and everything needs to be specific access control to who needs it. Like that. This isn't a one-size-fits-all situation. If you are, I'll try to come up with off the top of my head the simplest situations. If you're a B2B vendor, and you do 2 transactions a year with these 2 huge companies, and your business is physically being on site somewhere doing something, you don't really have much of an information security risk. Probably the only thing that you have that's really an issue is your employee data. Which at that scale, you're probably outsourcing. So it's not really your risk anyway.
Right. There's great companies that'll do that cheap.
But that's a really important question too, is who are you outsourcing to? If you're outsourcing to ADP, okay, they're a huge company. They probably have this great information security plan. Ask, how is my information protected? Let's have a conversation with whoever your rep is about what the controls are. Get comfortable with that. And if it's not ADP and some smaller vendor, make sure you have a conversation with them and that you're comfortable with their level of information security, because your customers aren't trusting your vendors with your security. If our tax software is compromised, our tax clients don't care that it was a software vendor. They care that they trusted us with their data and that their data was out there. So, the legal liability may be shareable with this third party, and there might be contractual language that we can rely on, but that relationship of trust, you can't.
Right, that's between, like you said, us and our clients.
Exactly.
That even if we have nothing to do with it, and these Thomson Reuters,
I hired
these
somebody.
big tech companies, right? You can't, even if the legal risk is shared, like you said,
it has to be a trust but verify situation.
Your clients lose trust in you, not hey, you've used
your
top
clients
10 global.
Ideally, if you are a client, you should be asking, hey, how is my information protected? You as an organization should talk to your business partners and say, how's our information protected? And if you're a service provider, you need to be prepared, with a report or some way of communicating, here's our stance on security, here's the real testing that we've done, here's how we are committed from the top to the bottom to make sure that we're doing the best that we can.
Getting us all mitigated. Because like you said, the last thing you want to do is find out that the plan is insufficient too late.
But the reality is that these things are happening a lot more often than I think people realize. There's security incidents all the time. Incident response plans are used all the time. And the better those plans are, the less dramatic it is, the less of a panic it is, the less of an event.
It's not
as
invasive.
You can continue your business and focus on the things that matter to you while all these things are happening. And there's some comfort because you've tabletoped this plan. You sat down and thought through this. You have a sample statement. You know who your insurance carrier is, and you know what that reporting requirement is. You get your breach coach involved early, even though you're not sure if it's a breach yet. all those things can really stack up in your favor to reduce the stress, reduce the disruption, and reduce the cost of responding to these incidents. Because if you're flailing around being like, oh my God, what do I do?
Yeah.
It's going to take hours or days or weeks to even get on top of what's
to come
happening.
up with a response, let alone
the right one.
fully mitigated and get back to business, right?
Yep.
And to your point, right? I know personally, I get phishing emails all the time, right? And to me, I feel like that's the one that's kind of always in the news, right? Is you can open up my email address and in my junk that's not from UPS, that's not from FedEx, that's not from, I don't know, that insurance carrier, right? Like I don't bank with JP Morgan, right? They all want you to click the link and enter some sort of login information.
But the scariest one for me is legitimate business partners, people that you work with and you know and you have relationships with and you're trusting to deliver you information because that's the industry that we're in.
Yep.
And they get compromised. So our security plan needs to not only plan for what is going to impact us and emails that you're going to get, but also if we have trusted people that we have relationships with, we need to make sure we're accounting for that. We have controls in place. We don't implicitly trust anyone in our messaging system for that very reason. It's annoying because it means that some client data doesn't get through, but it's critical because if a client is compromised and sends something through, we can't say, oh no, you're a client. Allow us to open all of our doors for you.
By all means.
Because that's terrible.
We'll click every link you send us because, well, I trust you, you trust me.
Exactly.
We're buddies.
And that is a business risk management issue because we might have a client that's upset because they emailed us and we didn't get it because we filtered it. But that makes sense for us because of the space that we're in, and we want to make sure that our users aren't overwhelmed with malicious information and they're down to the things that we trust or the things that we think we should trust. And we can say, hey, this came from outside the organization. We don't really know how we feel about this. We're just going to put some tags on it and leave it to the user to make a human judgment, because the best systems in the world will never be able to be perfect and protect everything. So you need the layers, and you need as much as possible. But again, to your point, the little crack can be all that you need.
Right, because it really does trickle down, right? You've tagged, UIT has tagged that email as, take a second look, right? This is outside. This is
a little questionable.
But hey, if I'm not going to take a second look because, this person's been a client for 10 years, they always send me PDFs.
Send me this.
I'm like, all right, hey, they must get a new system that requires my Windows login. This is
this looks like an Office 365 sign, ignoring that it's not the URL.
Right. Let me just go for it.
Yeah.
And it's not clients trying to run, get one by you. It's hey, they've been compromised and they don't know it yet.
And this is happening to tons of organizations out there, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't work with that vendor anymore. It's just you need to have a conversation with them to understand, okay, I see that you had this incident. We got this, stuff. What are you doing to make sure that you're doing this? And then support each other through that process and talk about, we, look at this communication security issue and we have these controls. Maybe you could look at this.
Yep.
A great example is like tons and tons of organizations are in Office 365, which is this monolithic, confusing platform that has tons of capabilities in it. Are you leveraging all of those?
Yeah.
Have you asked your technology people, are we using everything that we can? Are we on the right plan? If we're at this level of risk, is this really where we want to be? Do we want to maybe move to a different tier of the platform that adds additional controls? Or maybe it's a question of you have more controls than you need and you actually could downsize and not be on this Cadillac plan because you're not using those features and they don't impact your business anyway.
They're not business risks. Why are we paying for them?
Right. We don't use email. We do everything by phone. So all this email security doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Great. Let's focus on that. And by the way, are you training your staff to deal with phishing, which is voice-based phishing, and people who are calling in and saying, I just need to change this account over to that account because, they got the baby crying in the background on the tape recorder and they're trying to manipulate you to do something.
Through. Yeah.
These kinds of things have happened since the dawn of time. It's just the attackers now have a new toy to try to perpetrate these scams.
Well, so I just saw earlier this year, Andy Cohen, right? The CNN New Year's with Anderson Cooper. He clicked a phishing link that he thought was from Citibank. His bank happens to be Citibank. He clicked the link, entered his login credentials, and nothing came of it. 3 weeks later, there were other people who had logged in, called him and said, hey, somebody seems to be trying to send wires. Can you confirm which of your transactions? And they were logged into his account, so they're like naming all these things that were his, and then they made some up and they're like, no, those aren't mine. Okay, great. You're going to get a code from Citibank in a minute. Let me know the 5 numbers. Sure enough, he got the code. Okay, great. That one's canceled. You're going to get another one. Okay, now that
was actually authorized,
and it was outgoing wires, and it wasn't until the 3rd or 4th wire that he was like, "This is unusual," immediately hung up, called his bank. They didn't get all the money back.
No.
Because it's
voluntary separation, which is one of the more diabolical terms in that world.
Right. And just because they say they're from wherever they say they're from is, to your point about the voice phishing.
And some banks will even do things that, as a security professional, it's like, why are you guys doing this?
Yeah.
Like, I know a lot about this field and I am uncomfortable with the way that you communicated with me. Like, I got a call from I think it was Bank of America, and it was just a random number. And the person called it, hi, I'm so-and-so from Bank of America calling you from the security fraud department, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what?
Right. I don't know.
How do I authenticate you? Yeah. Like, I'm going to hang up. I'm going to call Bank of America back. How can I get back to you?
Right.
Like, tell me through your corporate switchboard. How do I get to you?
I'm calling the 800 number on the back of the card.
Yeah. Because this is just a weird interaction. I've never had this before. It might be completely legitimate.
Happy to have the conversation.
I don't trust you.
Yeah. But
so it's really having that level of suspicion and being willing to go through those extra steps, because, like we were talking about a while ago, the convenience.
Yeah.
So easy to just say, oh, whatever, I don't want to deal with this.
Right.
I'll
what
just
do you
do
need?
what I got to do. Just make this go away.
Yep.
I got two-factor. I got to trust this device. I got to put in this code. Fine, whatever. And that attitude is really where it all falls apart. And so attackers are usually going to try to, beat you down with something that makes you get to that point where it's like, I just don't.
I'm tired of dealing with this.
Or create some false sense of urgency where it's like, oh my God, we need to do this right now.
Because your card's been compromised. Yeah.
Like, we have people that, they'll get like an email with a signature block that looks like, oh, this is our actual CEO's signature block. And it's like, well, all that takes is a copy of an email that they sent at some point in the history of whenever that they got from some other compromised mailbox, and they can just copy and paste it into an email and kind of make it look like it came from them.
Right. It's the small details that, small manipulation in the spelling of a name and the spelling of a website.
Yeah, but at the same time, that's gotten a lot harder lately because tools like ChatGPT are out there. So it used to be a lot of these attackers are coming from places that don't speak English as their first language. So there would be these weird grammatical things, or like a use of a formal word where it didn't make sense, or capitalization would be weird, or those little indicators are just like, that doesn't smell right. But now they can just use a bot to generate the language.
Right.
And now you just get this nice, flowery, well-written email that happens to have a phishing link in it, which makes it that much harder for our filters to then be able to say, oh, clearly this is malicious.
Right, and that's the takeaway, and it's what you said about 2 minutes in. Just because you've done something back in 2015 and it was a great plan in 2015, that's not a great plan today.
Exactly.
In fact, the great plan that you put together in 2019 was probably significantly different as soon as you went
the
remote.
pandemic happened, and then all of those controls that you built meant nothing because your business process fundamentally changed. So whenever your process changes is really when you need to seriously revisit your plan and just stay aware of compliance obligations and what is going on. What do you do? Where's your data?
Right. And
what sensitive stuff do you have, and how do we need to protect it?
And that new proliferation of artificial intelligence, the ChatGPTs of the world, is yet another material change in
absolutely
in the IT environment, right? Not necessarily more or less risky. It's just a significant change.
Just another thing that happened, and we need to be aware of it.
Be aware of it.
And talk about, hey, what's the risk? Like, do we need to worry about writing a policy that says what our employees can do with ChatGPT? Like, okay, we don't want to necessarily stymie innovation, but we don't want people putting confidential information in a training algorithm that we don't know where that data is going to go.
That becomes maybe part of the public domain.
Yeah, there's a lot of open questions about the legality of how that all works and how trustworthy this organization that kind of came out of nowhere is. Like, what are we doing here? How can we engage with this platform in a secure way and guide our people and train them on how to use it, both as an innovation tool and from a security standpoint?
Yeah, and Tom, I mean, I think we'll kind of call it there. I feel like that's a kind of a fantastic summary. And so, I obviously want to thank you for coming on. This has, I think, been a really it's always timely to talk about IT security.
Unfortunately,
great job security for guys like you.
Yep.
So I certainly appreciate the time joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
This is great. And so that brings us to the end of another episode of Wilken and Gutton Plans, the Balance Sheet Breakdown. I'm Chris Frederick, and we try to help you make sense of the numbers.